My sister kicked me into the attic, but when I broke through the wall, I hit the attic wall 3 times and it cracked. Behind it was a steel door with a deadbolt, cold air leaking out like a freezer. I found a tiny brass key and taped inside my father's old toolbox. And when that door opened, I realized my sister had been living on my money, while millions were hidden above my head. The crazy part? She had already told me to clean out the attic, so I did. But I need to go back because this didn't start with a steel door. It started with my sister tearing my dress in half. The dress took me 4 months to make. Hand-stitched silk, French seams, invisible zipper. A client was willing to pay $1,200 for it. My sister Colette found it hanging in my workroom the night before the fitting. She held it up to the light, looked at it the way you look at something stuck to your shoe, and tore it down the middle with both hands. She dropped it on the tile and told me to clean up my mess before her friends arrived for dinner. That was the moment I should have left. But I did not. And what happened next turned a torn dress into an $8 million lesson in patience. My name is Nadia. Colette is my older sister. Our mother died when I was 3. Our father raised us alone until he passed when I was 23. Colette was 30 at the time, and she had been running the household since she was a teenager. She cooked, she signed permission slips, she drove me to school. And she never let me forget it. That was her currency. Not money, debt. Every meal she made, every ride she gave, every hour she spent being the older sister, instead of being a kid herself, was a transaction she logged in her head. And the bill came due the day our father died. Within months, Colette had restructured everything. The house went into her name. She said it was simpler for taxes. Our father's truck, the one I used to drive to my tailoring jobs, she sold. She said the insurance was too expensive for 2 vehicles. His small savings account disappeared into what she called household operating costs. Every decision was a locked door, disguised as a reasonable explanation. And when I questioned any of it, she played the card she always played. I raised you, Nadia. I gave up my 20s for you. And this is how you repay me. That sentence was a cage, because it was partly true. She did sacrifice, she did show up. But sacrifice does not give you ownership of another person. It does not entitle you to eat someone alive and call it family. I stayed because I had nowhere else to go. I was building a tailoring business out of the back room. Clients came to the house. I altered suits, hemmed dresses, repaired things people thought were beyond saving. Every dollar I made went into the household, because Colette insisted we split costs equally. Equally meant I paid half the mortgage on a house I did not own. Equally meant I bought groceries for a kitchen she controlled. Equally meant I funded a life that had my labor in it, but not my name. Colette did not work. She managed. That was her word for it. She managed the house, managed the finances, managed my schedule. In reality, she spent her days redecorating rooms I was not allowed to use and having lunch with women who thought she was a saint for raising her little sister alone. But here is what nobody knew. Colette was not just living off my income, she was leveraging the house. She had taken out a home equity line against the property our father had paid off, and was spending it on renovations, furniture, and a lifestyle that looked like success but was built on borrowed walls. I found this out later. At the time, all I knew was that money went in and money disappeared, and I was always the one holding the short end. The fabric was the breaking point. I had spent 3 months building an inventory. Bolts of Italian cotton, Japanese linen, a piece of French silk I had saved for weeks to afford. I came home from a fitting on a Tuesday and found my workroom empty, stripped clean. Colette had hired a crew to clear it out. She said she was converting the space into an office. She needed it for managing the renovation contractors. I asked where my fabric was. She said it was in the dumpster behind the grocery store. She said it the way you say the recycling went out this morning, like it was nothing. I went to that dumpster in the rain. I pulled out what I could save. The silk was gone, soaked through and buried under restaurant waste. 3 months of savings destroyed in one afternoon because my sister wanted a desk. That night, Colette told me I could keep sewing if I moved upstairs. The attic. Unfinished ceiling, no insulation, 1 bare bulb, no heat. She said it like she was being generous. She said most people would have told me to get a real job by now. I moved to the attic. I carried my machine up the narrow stairs myself. I set up a table under the single window. I hung a curtain across the corner and put a mattress on the floor because Colette made it clear my bedroom was now a guest room for the contractors she was hiring. I lived in the attic of my father's house like I was renting space in my own life. But I kept working. I stitched in the heat and I stitched in the cold. And I rebuilt my client list one hem at a time. The attic was miserable, but it was the only space in that house that Colette did not want. And sometimes the thing nobody wants is the safest place to be. Before I continue, I want to know who is here with me right now. What city are you watching from and what time is it where you are? Drop it in the comments. I love seeing where this story reaches. 3 months later, Colette decided to sell the house. She said the market was hot and she wanted to cash out. She gave me 45 days to find somewhere to live. No discussion. That same week, a past due notice arrived from the electric company. I opened it because Colette was out and she had put the utilities in my name months ago. Another bill she did not want on her credit. The amount was nearly $3,000. I looked at the usage breakdown. The house was pulling far more power than it should have been. I checked the graph. The spike was constant. Not seasonal, not daytime only. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, month after month. And the draw was coming from the attic circuit. I lived in the attic, I used one light bulb and a sewing machine. There was no way I was pulling that kind of power. I went to the breaker box in the basement. The attic circuit was labeled A3. But next to it was another breaker I had never noticed. A 4. No label. It was warm to the touch. I followed the wiring. It ran up through the wall, through the second floor, and into the attic crawl space. The cable disappeared behind the far wall at the end of the attic. The wall that had always been blocked by old boxes labeled Christmas and linens. I had never moved them because they were heavy and covered in years of dust, and I had no reason to think they were anything but what they said they were. I moved them now. Behind the stack, the wall was different. Newer drywall. Cleaner seams. Someone had built this recently. Within the last several years. I knocked. Hollow. I went downstairs, got a hammer, and came back up. 3 hits and the drywall cracked open. Behind it was a steel door with a heavy deadbolt. Cool air poured through the seams. Someone had installed a climate-controlled room behind a false wall in the attic of my father's house. The deadbolt needed a key. I searched for an hour. Nothing in the attic. Nothing in the hallway. Then I remembered my father's old toolbox in the basement, the one Colette had never opened because she called it junk. I dug through the rusted wrenches and drill bits and found a small brass key taped to the inside of the lid. It fit. The door swung inward. The room was small, maybe 10 by 12, lined with cedar panels and humidity gauges. Soft lighting triggered by the door, and hanging on steel racks along every wall were garments. Dozens of them. Wrapped in acid-free tissue. Tagged with handwritten labels. I pulled the nearest one off the rack, unwrapped the tissue. Inside was a black wool jacket with a silk lining. The construction was immaculate. I turned it over and looked at the label. Chanel, 1963. My hands were shaking. I pulled another. Dior, 1958. Another. Balenciaga. Another. Givenchy. The room was full of them. Vintage haute couture spanning 3 decades. Perfectly preserved. Hidden in the attic of a house that was about to be sold for $400,000. I sat on the floor of that vault with a 1963 Chanel jacket in my lap, and I understood 3 things at once. My father had been hiding something extraordinary. Colette had no idea it existed, and she had just asked me to clean out the attic. I looked at the inside of the jacket one more time. Stitched into the lining, in small thread, were 2 initials. V.M. I did not know whose initials those were, but I was going to find out. V.M. The same initials were stitched into every garment. 47 pieces. Same handwriting on every tag, same thread. I searched my father's old filing cabinet the next morning. Behind the tax folders, I found a sealed manila envelope. Inside were a magazine clipping from 1964 showing a woman in a Dior coat at a fashion show in Milan, a business card that read Vivienne Moreau, senior fashion editor, and a photograph of my father standing next to that woman wearing the same Chanel jacket I had found the night before. Vivienne Moreau, VM, my mother. She had spent years in the fashion world collecting pieces that most people only saw behind glass. My father had spent the rest of his life preserving them in a vault behind a wall that nobody thought to look behind. He never told anyone. Not me. Not Colette. He just kept paying the electric bill and keeping the climate system running and waiting for someone to find it. But I did not have time for grief. I had 45 days before Colette sold the house and everything in it. I found Mr. Hargrove through a vintage fashion dealer in the city. He specialized in estate valuations for haute couture and had authenticated pieces for auction houses across the world. He agreed to come on a Tuesday when Colette was out. I told him to park down the street. Mr. Hargrove climbed the attic stairs in a three-piece suit and did not complain once. When I opened the vault door, he stopped in the doorway. He did not speak for almost a full minute. Then he stepped inside, put on cotton gloves, and began examining pieces one at a time. He spent 4 hours in that room. He photographed everything. He checked labels, stitching, fabric composition, lining condition. He held a 1958 Dior evening gown up to the light, and his hands trembled. He said he had seen photographs of this dress in a museum catalog. It had been listed as whereabouts unknown since the early 70s. When he finished, he sat on an overturned box in my attic workspace and took off his glasses. He was quiet for a while. Then he gave me the numbers. At a fast private sale, the collection would bring between 6 and 8 million. At a properly marketed auction, with the right provenance documentation, it could reach 10 to 12 million. Some individual pieces could sell for 7 figures on their own. He said this collection was not just valuable, it was historically significant. I asked him to write a formal appraisal. He shook my hand at the bottom of the stairs and said something I did not expect. He said, "Your mother had extraordinary taste. Protect this." That night I sat alone in the attic with the vault door open behind me. The cool air drifted out and mixed with the warm summer heat. I could smell the cedar. I held the photograph from the envelope and looked at the woman in the Chanel jacket. My mother. She had walked through rooms I would never see. She had touched fabric I had only read about. And she had left it all here, in the one room everyone wanted to forget. My father never told me who she was. He just taught me to sew and let me figure out the rest. Maybe that was his way of telling me. Not with words, with thread. I ran the numbers. The house Colette was about to sell was worth $400,000. The collection hidden in its attic was worth up to 12 million. Colette controlled the house, but she had no idea what was inside it. And she had already told me to clean out the attic before the listing went live. That was when the plan took shape. I did not rush. I spent the next 2 weeks preparing. I reserved a climate-controlled storage unit outside the city. I found a freight company that specialized in transporting delicate goods. I had Mr. Hargrove's written appraisal locked in a safe deposit box at a bank Colette did not know about. And I drafted a document. The document was simple. 1 page. It stated that all contents currently stored in the attic of the property were to be transferred to my ownership effective immediately. It listed the reason as cleanup and removal of personal items in preparation for sale. It included a clause releasing Colette from any liability or cost associated with the removal. It looked like a favor. It read like I was saving her the trouble of hiring a junk crew. Colette came home from a showing with the realtor on a Wednesday evening. She was in a good mood. The realtor had suggested listing at $425. She was already spending the money in her head. She poured herself a glass of wine and sat at the kitchen island scrolling through listings on her phone. I walked in with the document and a pen. I told her I wanted to clear out the attic before the open house. Old boxes, dusty clothes, junk that had been up there for years. I said I would handle all of it, but I needed her to sign a release so that anything I removed was legally mine to dispose of. I told her it would save her the cost of a cleanup crew. She did not look up from her phone. She asked if it was going to cost her anything. I said no. She asked if it would delay the listing. I said no. She held out her hand for the pen. She signed it without reading a single word, the same way she had signed away my workroom. The same way she had signed my name off the house. The same way she had spent years making decisions without looking at what she was actually giving away. I thanked her and went back upstairs. The next morning I called the freight company. 2 men arrived in a white van at 7 while Colette was still asleep. We wrapped each garment individually. Acid-free tissue. Custom garment boxes. Climate tags in every container. 5 hours. 47 pieces packed into 14 sealed crates. The men carried them down one at a time and loaded them into the van. Colette woke up around noon. She came to the bottom of the attic stairs in her bathrobe holding coffee. She looked at the last crates being carried down and wrinkled her nose. "What is all that?" she said. "Old clothes," I said. "Junk from the attic." "Exactly what you asked me to clean out." She sipped her coffee and watched the men load the van. She shook her head and said, "I cannot believe Dad kept all that garbage up there." She said it must feel good to finally get rid of it. I said it does. The van pulled away. 14 crates. 47 garments. Up to $12 million in vintage haute couture. Legally mine. Signed, dated, and witnessed. Colette went back inside and called the realtor to schedule the open house. I sat in my car in the driveway. Not celebrating. Thinking about my father. About how the key was in his toolbox. About how the password to the lock was shaped like a brass key he taped to the lid of a box Colette called junk. About how the only way in was through a wall nobody wanted to look behind in a room nobody wanted to live in. He did not hide the collection from me. He hid it where only someone like me would find it. Someone who had been sent to the attic. Someone who had nothing left to lose and enough patience to look at the walls. 3 weeks later, the house sold. $410,000. Colette deposited the check and did not offer me a cent. She said the house was in her name and the equity was hers. She said I should be grateful she let me live there as long as she did. I moved into a small studio apartment across town. I set up my sewing machine by the window. I hung one photograph on the wall. My mother, in the Chanel jacket, standing at a fashion show in Milan. Mr. Hargrove called on a Friday afternoon. The appraisal was complete. Every piece authenticated. The total estimated value at auction was $11.6 million. 2 major auction houses were interested. He said the Dior evening gown alone could anchor an entire sale. I asked him to proceed. He said he would need the signed transfer document for provenance records. I told him I had it. He paused. Then he said, "I need to ask you something. Does your sister know what she signed away?" I said, "No." He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "She is going to find out." I said, "I know." The first auction lot went live on a Thursday morning. Mr. Hargrove had arranged it with one of the top houses in New York. The catalog described the collection as a rediscovered archive of mid-century haute couture, previously believed lost. Assembled by a former senior fashion editor whose name had not appeared in print in decades. They called it the Moreau Collection. I sat in my studio apartment watching the live stream on my laptop with my sewing machine humming behind me. The Balenciaga coat sold first. It opened at $80,000. Within 4 minutes, it was at $370,000. It closed at $460,000 for a single coat. I put my hand over my mouth and did not move it for the next 2 hours. The Dior evening gown opened at $200,000. It sold for $1.4 million. A museum bought it. A museum bought my mother's dress. By the end of the afternoon, 14 pieces had sold. Total revenue was $4.1 million. And that was just the first sale. Mr. Hargrove had scheduled 3 more over the following months. I closed my laptop and sat in silence. Then I picked up the photograph of my mother in the Chanel jacket and held it against my chest. I did not cry. I was past crying. I was somewhere on the other side of it, where everything feels still and bright and slightly unreal. 2 weeks later, Colette found out. She did not find out from me. Someone sent her a link. A fashion blog had picked up the auction story. The headline mentioned the Moreau collection and the record-breaking Dior sale. The article included photographs of the collection being transported. In the background of one shot, barely visible, was the exterior of our father's house. Colette called me at 9 in the morning. I was hemming a jacket for a client. I let it ring 3 times before I picked up. Her voice was shaking. Not from sadness, from something harder. She asked me what the Moreau collection was. I told her. She asked me where I found it. I told her. She asked me how much it was worth. I told her that too. The line went quiet. I could hear her breathing. Then she said those were in the house. That was my house. That collection belongs to me. I said it belonged to you. Then you asked me to clean out the attic, and you signed a document transferring all contents to me, dated, signed, and witnessed. That paper was about old clothes, she said. Old boxes. Junk. I said the paper does not say junk, it says all contents currently stored in the attic. Those are your initials on every page. You signed it, Colette. You did not even read it. She hung up. What came next was the lawyer's letter. 3 days later, Colette was contesting the transfer. She claimed the document was signed under false pretenses. She claimed I had deliberately misrepresented the value of the contents. She claimed the collection was part of the estate and should be divided equally. Equally, that word again. The same word she used when I was paying half the mortgage on a house she owned, the same word she used when she was spending my income while building her equity. Equally only existed in Colette's vocabulary when she was losing. I called my lawyer, he reviewed the transfer document. He reviewed the electric bills that Colette had put in my name for years, the same bills whose usage spikes proved the vault had been running the entire time under her ownership. He reviewed the signed transfer with her initials on every page. He called me back and said 3 words. It is binding. Colette's lawyer advised her to settle. She refused. She wanted a court date. She wanted to argue coercion, fraud, diminished awareness. Her lawyer told her she had signed a clear document transferring ownership of specified contents. There was no coercion. There was no misrepresentation. The document said all contents. All contents meant all contents. A judge would not redefine the English language because his client did not bother to read what she signed. Colette dropped the case 6 weeks later. The legal fees alone had cost her over $40,000. The house money was already half gone. The equity line she had taken out was still accruing interest on a property she no longer owned. The lifestyle she had built on borrowed walls was collapsing, and there was no one left to hand the bill to. The remaining auctions went through over the following months. The final total, after all 47 pieces sold, minus fees, commissions, and taxes, was $8.2 million. Mr. Hargrove called to give me the number. I wrote it on a piece of paper and pinned it to the wall above my sewing machine. Not because I wanted to look at it every day. Because I wanted to remember what patience looks like when it finally pays off. I did not buy a mansion. I did not buy a sports car. I did not post anything online. I did the thing I had been doing my entire life. I worked. I leased a proper studio space downtown. I hired 2 assistants. I bought the fabrics I had always wanted to work with, but could never afford. I started taking commissions from clients who found me through word of mouth and through the small reputation I had built one hem at a time in an attic with no heat and 1 dead light bulb. The business grew. Not fast. Not loud. But steady. The way things grow when the roots are real. And then I did one more thing. Months after the last auction, Colette's money was gone. The house money. The equity line. All of it spent. She had been living beyond what $400,000 could sustain, which for Colette was about 11 months. The house on Edgemont Street came back on the market. Our father's house. The buyers had run into permit issues and decided to sell. The listing price was $380,000. I bought it in cash. I walked through the front door for the first time in almost a year and stood in the kitchen where my sister had torn my dress in half. I walked up the stairs, past the guest room that used to be my bedroom, past the office that used to be my workroom. Up the narrow staircase to the attic. The vault was gone. The buyers had torn it out, but the space was still there. The sloped ceiling. The single window. The spot where I had put my mattress on the floor. I had the attic rebuilt, insulated, climate-controlled, skylights, proper lighting, a long cutting table down the center, fabric storage along the walls, a fitting area with mirrors and natural light. I turned the room where my sister had sent me to disappear into the best workspace I had ever had. The sign on the front door reads Moreau Atelier, my mother's name, on a building my father built, in a room my sister gave away. Colette knows about the house. She has not come by. She has not called since the case was dropped. I heard through a cousin that she tells people I tricked her, that I took advantage of family trust, that she raised me and I repaid her by stealing. She still tells that story, the one where she sacrificed everything and I gave nothing back. But here is what I know. I did not steal from Colette. I survived her. There is a difference. Stealing is taking what belongs to someone else. Surviving is keeping what was always yours. My mother's collection was never Colette's. It was hidden in a room Colette never entered, behind a wall Colette never noticed, unlocked by a key Colette never thought to look for. It waited there in the dark until the person it was meant for was finally desperate enough to look. Every label has a name stitched into it. For decades, that name was hidden. Now it is on the front door. If someone in your life has ever made you feel like your work does not matter, like your skills are a hobby and your dreams are a waste of time, I want you to hear this. The thing they dismiss is often the thing that saves you. The room they send you to might be the room that changes everything. You do not owe anyone your talent. You do not owe anyone your patience. And you do not owe anyone a share of what you built in the dark while they were busy redecorating. And one more question. Has anyone ever signed away something valuable because they were too arrogant to look at what was right in front of them? I want to hear that story. Drop it in the comments. Sometimes the best lessons are the ones someone else refused to learn. If this story hit you somewhere, subscribe. We have more coming. I will see you in the next one. Take care of yourselves.